Here to help us analyze how these protests could affect the upcoming election is Republican strategist Joseph Pinion, the founder of Pinion Enterprise. So, Joseph, when we look at this from a campaign standpoint, I know that a lot of people will say that Joe Biden hasn't directly called to defund the police, although he has gotten pretty close. He said that he wants to reallocate funds to different departments. How do you think that this strategy plays into the progressives who are calling to defund the police and the message that Biden will be trying to make to independent voters?
Look, I think the reality is, I think I've said before, my grandfather taught me at a young age, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. And so Joe Biden has made friends with a lot of people who are calling for the defunding of police, who are calling for this type of ideological approach to the history of racial inequality in this country. So I think that if he's going to try to appeal to independents, he's going to have a difficult time convincing people that Grandpa Joe was the same as Uncle Joe of old, because the two messages are completely different, and they're really not actually in lockstep with the majority of most Americans.
And I feel like that speaks to the echo chamber that a lot of people are currently in. For example, a lot of people turn on the news looking for a solidification of what they already believe. And I think that this is something, too, where Joe Biden will say at times that he does want to defund the police in order to appease the progressive wing of the party. And then he'll say something along the lines of, I have 40 years of a strong record of supporting police. So maybe the independent voters hear that as well. Do you think that is something that maybe that campaign is trying to do, kind of play both sides without kind of alienating the other?
Well, look, I think that the unfortunate reality is that I think the media allows Joe Biden to be who he needs to be to whoever happens to be watching him at that particular point in time. And so when you have Joe Biden who wants to juxtapose his record of, 30 years ago with the rhetoric of the present, it makes it very difficult for your low information voter, the person who knows who Joe Biden is, my word as a Biden, Joe Biden. It makes it difficult for them to understand who this person standing before them is. And so I think if we're talking about what the strategy should be on the right for President Trump and the Republican base, it should be to say that, you have revealed yourselves to us all. That you, again, have revealed yourself to be someone who will kowtow to the needs of an AOC. You have revealed yourself to be somebody who may be a nice person at heart, but surely is long in the tooth and past his prime. Those are the messages that I think the Republican Party should be focused on, that Joe Biden does not have a plan to bring America out of a COVID-19 economy, because the only experience he has dealing with the economy was as co-pilot in the slowest recovery in the history of the modern world, with Barack Obama coming out of the backside of a Great Recession.
You bring up an interesting point about the media. In fact, Attorney General Bill Barr just said that the media has a blackout on violent nature of the unrest in many of these cities, meaning that they're not covering a lot of the violent portions of these protests that we are seeing, whether it be Portland, New York, Chicago, whatever it may be. Do you think that the media is doing a job in facilitating these false narratives, as you were mentioning? And do you think that the Republican Party is doing an effective job at painting the other side of this picture, that being that there is some violent unrest taking place in these cities?
Well, look, you don't have to be, a social scientist to understand math and dollars. There have been millions upon millions of dollars in damages done to NYPD property. There's been millions of dollars in property damages done to businesses all across New York City and places like Chicago and places like Minneapolis, all across this country. The insurance companies will tell you that the amount of actual damages that have been done, that they're going to have to actually pay out for. There is a person at the end of all of those zeros, at the end of all of those policies. And those people are hardworking Americans who simply want to be able to live their lives in peaceful harmony. So I think that message needs to get out. That reality needs to be told. And I think the media does all of us a disservice when they ignore the real consequences of the pain that has manifested itself through this violence and civil discourse.
I think you bring up a really good point that when you take away the numbers of this, there are people behind those numbers as well. And I think it goes the same way with the police chief and the police who are being defunded as well. I mean, you're not just taking away money from a police department. I know a lot of people think that maybe police are too militarized, but there are people that are behind those numbers as well. There are police officers with families, pensions, who are out there protecting those small businesses that you're talking about. So I think it's very important, too, to humanize this issue and bring it beyond the figures that we often represent, because you're exactly right. When we talk about the damage that was done in Minneapolis, for example, I think the estimate that they had was $500 million. And that's coming from small businesses, immigrant communities, minority populations that you're talking about. So I think that our job in the media is to really put a face to those figures as well and start talking about the people who lost something in these riots. I think you're right on to say that. Joseph Pinion, it's always a pleasure having you on. Thanks for joining us tonight.